Hey everybody, Ryan here at Etrailer. Today on our 2015 Mini Winnie Motorhome, we're going to be showing you how to install the Sumo Springs Helper Springs for the front axle. But before we get into that, why don't we just take a minute, check these out, and make sure they're going to work for you. Before we get started, what we like to do is just some before and after. That way we can compare our ride quality before we put the front Sumos on and after to see if it makes a big improvement. Now in the past, I've done these quite a bit with stock type suspension and they make a big difference. I'm really curious with our particular setup here today though, because we've already done some work to it in the past. It has some upgraded components, a sway bar, a steering stabilizer, and everything else. And so this should really be a good test. Are we going to be able to feel the benefits from the Sumo Springs over or in conjunction with our other components that we already have on there? So this should be interesting, but why don't we go ahead, hop in, we'll run through our test course and see how it feels. So here inside, the first thing that we're gonna do is go over some bumps. Like I said, with these parts on here already, these other suspension parts, it probably won't be too bad. And so we'll see if there's room for improvement. And as we get going over them, really not terrible. On stock suspension ones, we do a lot of these types of upgrades here. You usually get a lot of back and forth. Just the camper just takes a few sways left and right to kind of center itself again. There's still a little bit of that. And I feel like the Sumo should help with that, because when that control arm comes up, it's going to make contact with that Sumo spring and kind of keep it more planted. So not terrible, but definitely room for some improvement. Now with that said, the majority of the time, these Sumo springs seem to really shine whenever we're making sweeping turns or sharp aggressive turns. So why don't we go check that portion out and see how it feels now. So we're here in a somewhat open area, and I'm gonna do my best to try to get this motorhome going back and forth and get some energy going through the chassis here. And even with these other parts, it's the steering's better, but you can feel the motorhomes, these are just so top heavy. You get a lot of body roll and a lot of sway, and doing this, it just takes a lot of time to recover. You feel that weight throwing you over, and you got to crank the wheel, get it straightened out. Like I said in the past, this is where these usually help quite a bit. So this motorhome definitely did that, leaning over super hard. So hopefully these will improve. Now that we have our front Sumo Springs installed, why don't we go ahead, hop back in, run through our test course again, and see if there's a difference. So we're gonna do the same exact thing as we did before. And like I said, I'm really curious to see how these work with some of our other parts. Get going over these bumps here. Try to get some energy going through the chassis. And even just over these first few, I actually can feel a difference, believe it or not. A pretty significant one actually. Beforehand, it really just in the amount of sway. Really don't feel a huge change in the wheel or anything like that, but really just the amount of sway. Like I said beforehand, that it would kind of take a second or two to kind of stop that. And with these on there now, I'd say we probably got about half that wait time. So not nearly as much bouncing around like this. It feels like it wants to ride flat, and is actually an improvement there. So back on the slalom here, and like I said, this is usually where really things shine. And actually, that still holds true for this one, much better. I'm getting a lot more aggressive here, getting a lot more speed into these turns, and it still feels better than what it did before. It just, whenever you turn, you just don't get that slop, like the motorhome wanting to tip over. It's still there a little bit, don't get me wrong, you're never going to completely correct that, but it is twice as good, at least, I think it's safe to say, than what it was before. Now that we got done driving around and seeing how these feel, figured it'd be useful just to take a look underneath and see how they actually look installed. So this is them. They're going to fill that void between your front axle and the bottom of your frame and provide a cushion there, more or less, to help kind of absorb all that shock and give the motorhome some more support. You know, when this motorhome sways left and right, you know, these are going to make contact and help keep it true, or keep it flat and planted to the ground. These are essentially progressive, so the more weight applied to them, if you will, the more aggressive that they're going to get in terms of you know, keeping everything stable and support. And you know, it's a super simple design, but it's really effective actually. All these are going to do is replace your factory type jounce bumpers, all right, these little rubber blocks. And these essentially do nothing for support. These just prevent your suspension from bottoming out. So by the time they do anything, you're already getting jostled around. So by filling in that void, you know, just the ride quality overall is going to be definitely improved. And these are maintenance free as well. So you don't have to do anything special with them. Once they're on there, you know, you could forget about them and you're done. These are the heavy duty versions, so these are going to support 1,000 pounds. They're not going to increase your load carrying capacity or anything. It's just how much weight these can handle. There are some lighter duty ones available. They're blue in color, and they're essentially exactly the same. They're just a little bit softer, more or less, and those support 500 pounds. Either one will work. On a motorhome like this, if it were me, I would just go with the more heavy duty ones. You know, it just makes more sense to me in terms of the benefits that you're going to get. If it was a lighter motorhome or smaller truck or something, maybe that these would fit on, the blues I'd consider. But in this case, I feel like the heavy duty ones are definitely a little more beneficial. But other than that, at the end of the day, you know, a suspension enhancement that definitely made an improvement. And like I said, I'm glad to see it worked and was definitely noticeable even with other upgrades. So for those of you that don't have those other upgrades and just plan on doing this, for example, you're going to be able to tell a big difference. But you know, I do suggest if you're doing the front Sumos, think about doing the rear and some of those other enhancements. It's only going to make your driving experience that much better. You know, it's definitely not going to hurt anything. One of the best parts about these ones, though, is the installation. You would think with a motorhome and a chassis like this, it'd be a lot of work, and that's just not the case with these. Essentially, you get the front up in the air to give you a little more clearance. Remove the factory ones. It's one 10 millimeter bolt you pull out, and then the Sumos just thread in by hand. So really not a whole lot to it. Shouldn't take you a whole lot of time. It usually takes more time to set up than it does to actually get them in. But if you'd like to see how that's done, feel free to hang around. We'll go ahead and knock that out together now. To beginner installation, you're going to want to park on flat level ground, and you want to jack the front of your motorhome up. That way the tires and suspension will hang down freely. And the reason for that is to get those as far away from the frame as possible and create a big opening there. That way we can, you know, actually get our Sumo in there and have some room to work. So whenever you're doing this, you know, you always want to use proper safety precautions and make sure everything is solid and safe before you even think about getting underneath your motorhome. First things first, we need to remove our factory jounce bumper, which is this rubber block right here. And whatever we do to this side of the vehicle, we're also going to do to the other side, because it'll be set up the exact same way. So just keep that in mind moving forward. But to get this off, there's a hole in the bottom of it. And if you take a deep well 10 millimeter socket, you're able to get on that bolt and get it removed. So this will drop down and we can get it out of the way, as we won't be reinstalling it. And in the bottom of the frame where the original bolt was threaded up into, what I'm going to do is just take a tube brush, just kind of run it through there a couple times just to clean out any, you know, old rust or dirt that may have gotten in there over the years. Now we can grab our Sumo spring, and there's going to be a threaded bolt coming out of it. That's just going to thread right up into the frame. I am going to just put a drop of blue Loctite on the threads, just be on the safe side, and this doesn't back out because this will just thread in there by hand. So pretty straightforward. You simply just line this up and thread it all the way in, about as tight as you can get it by hand. Once you have the other side wrapped up, that's really about it. You know, lower the motorhome back down, and probably not a bad idea to maybe hop in and go for a spin and make sure everything feels good. And that'll finish up our look at and our installation of the Sumo Springs front helper springs for the front axle on our 2015 Mini Winnie Motorhome.